I came to fix her porch light, a simple job that should have ended at the door. But her gaze held me, raw and unguarded, whispering things we couldn't say. What she does next will break every rule we've both been fighting to keep. My name is Harlan Voss, and at 23, I was still piecing together what it meant to stand on my own 2 feet, in a world that felt both too vast and too confining. I'd left behind the half-hearted lectures of community college after just 1 year, trading textbooks for the gritty satisfaction of turning wrenches at Ironclad Garage, a weathered shop hunkered down on Maple Ridge Road in the sleepy town of Eldridge Hollow, upstate New York. The place was a relic, backed up against an abandoned railroad track where rust ate away at the rails like forgotten memories. Winters here clawed at you with icy fingers, and summers stretched lazy and humid. But the work was honest, fixing trucks that groaned under the weight of farm loads, patching up sedans that had seen better days. My hands were always stained with grease, a badge of the life I was building, one repair at a time, while my mind drifted to dreams of something more, though I couldn't quite name it yet. That particular evening in late autumn, the sky had already deepened to a bruised violet, shadows lengthening across the garage floor as I wiped down my tools. The radio crackled with some faded rock ballad, the kind that made you think about roads not taken. Theo, my boss, a burly man with a perpetual scowl and a soft spot for his daughter's soccer games, had ducked out early, leaving me to lock up. The phone jangled on the wall, shattering the quiet. I picked it up, expecting another gripe about a flat tire or a sputtering engine. Ironclad Garage, this is Harlan. How can I help? The voice on the line was calm but laced with an undercurrent of urgency, soft like velvet worn thin at the edges. Hello, this is Mirabelle Thorne. My car's making this awful grinding noise, and I'm pulled over on Route 42, about 5 miles outside town. It's getting dark out here. Could you send someone to take a look? Route 42 snaked through the rolling hills, a lonely ribbon of asphalt flanked by dense woods and the occasional deer crossing sign. Cell service was patchy at best, and with night falling fast, leaving anyone stranded felt wrong. I glanced at the clock, 6:45, and felt a twinge of reluctance, but Theo's voice echoed in my head. Never turn away a customer in need. Ma'am, I'm the only one left here tonight, but I can head out. Describe where you are exactly. She pinpointed a pull-off near the old stone bridge spanning Willow Creek, her words precise, almost measured. I gathered my toolkit, slung it into the cab of the shop's ancient Ford tow truck with its chipped red paint, and hit the road. The drive wound through the darkening landscape, leaves whipping past in the wind like fleeting thoughts, the air crisp with the promise of an early frost. My mind wandered. Why was I always the one picking up the slack? But there was a quiet thrill in it, too, the sense of being needed, even if it was just for a busted alternator. When I pulled up, her silver Honda Accord sat there with the hood propped open, hazards blinking faintly against the encroaching dusk. She stood beside it, arms folded tightly across her chest, clad in a long, dark coat and boots that seemed out of place on this rural stretch, more city elegance than country practicality. As my headlights swept over her, she turned, and even in the low light, her presence struck me. Tall and composed, with dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail that caught the breeze, she had a beauty that was understated, etched with the subtle lines of experience around her eyes. She looked to be in her late 30s, perhaps 38, carrying herself with a poise that spoke of years I'd yet to live, a quiet authority that made my pulse quicken unexpectedly. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said as I stepped out, her voice warmer now, less strained. "I'm Mirabelle. This happened out of nowhere. I was driving back from a meeting in Albany, and suddenly that grinding started." I didn't want to risk pushing it further, especially alone out here. I nodded, trying to keep my tone professional, though something about her, maybe the isolation of the spot, the creek gurgling below the bridge, or just the way the wind tousled her hair, made the moment feel charged. "No problem at all, Ms. Thorne. Name's Harlan. Let's see what's going on." I popped my flashlight and leaned under the hood, inspecting belts and connections while she lingered nearby, not hovering but close enough that I caught a subtle hint of vanilla and jasmine on the breeze. As I worked, she broke the silence. "Do you often work this late?" "It must get tiring, being on call like that." "Only when the boss bails early," I replied, flashing a quick smile over my shoulder. Our eyes met, and hers held mine a beat longer than casual conversation demanded, sending a faint ripple through me. Curiosity or something deeper? I pushed it aside, focusing on the task. "Looks like your alternator's failing. It's not charging right, causing that noise. I can tow it back, but it'll need parts tomorrow morning at the earliest." She exhaled, rubbing her forehead with a gloved hand. "Of course it is. Just my luck. I live over in River's Edge Estates off Hawthorne Lane, about 10 miles from here. Would you mind giving me a lift? I don't fancy waiting for a cab in this chill." Policy was clear. Keep it professional, no personal rides. But the road was deserted, the temperature dropping, and she was alone. Leaving her felt like turning my back on basic decency. "Sure, I can do that. Let me hook up the car first. You can wait in the truck where it's warm." While I secured the chains, the wind howled through the trees, carrying the distant hoot of an owl. Mirabelle climbed into the passenger seat, her outline visible through the fogging window. Once done, I slid in beside her, the cab suddenly intimate, filled with the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the truck's oil and leather. We drove in relative quiet at first, the towed car bumping softly behind us, the radio off to avoid awkward static. "What do you do for work?" I asked, glancing her way to break the tension. "Project manager at a consulting firm in Albany," she said, gazing out at the shadowy woods. "Lots of deadlines, travel, the usual chaos. And you? Been at the garage long?" "About a year now. It's reliable, helps me save up while I sort out what's next." I kept my eyes on the curving road, but I felt her studying me, her presence pulling at something unspoken. We turned onto Hawthorne Lane, a smooth drive leading to the modern townhouses of River's Edge Estates, perched along a gentle river bend. Her unit, number 47, had a manicured lawn and a welcoming porch light that cut through the night. I eased into the driveway, the brakes sighing as we stopped. "I can't thank you enough, Harlan," she said, unclipping her seatbelt. "Here's my card, in case you need more info on the car." She fished it from her purse, her fingers grazing mine as she passed it over. The contact was fleeting, but it lingered, warm against the cool air. "Will do. I'll update you in the morning." She hesitated, hand on the door, then looked back. "If it's late, when you're done tomorrow, just take my number and call at night. I don't sleep much anyway. Better than wondering." Her words landed softly, ordinary on the surface, but with an undercurrent that made my chest tighten. Was it just practicality, or something more? She offered a small smile, then slipped out, waving as she walked to her door, the porch light haloing her figure. I drove back to the garage, the card heavy in my pocket, replaying every glance, every pause. It was nothing, I told myself, just a tow job. But as I locked up and climbed the stairs to my cramped apartment above the laundromat on Cedar Bluff Street, the night's quiet amplified my thoughts, leaving me restless under the thin blankets. The following day dawned gray and overcast, the garage buzzing with the usual rhythm of air compressors and clanging metal. I ordered the alternator from our Albany supplier, assuring Theo it'd be a straightforward fix. Around noon, I texted Mirabelle. "Parts incoming, ready by evening." Her response pinged back swiftly. "Great, let me know when." By late afternoon, the car purred smoothly in the lot. The sun hung low, painting the railroad tracks in golden hues. I could have called then, but her phrase echoed, "Call at night." I waited until after 8, after scarfing a burger at Harvest Grill, a cozy diner on the town's fringe with vinyl booths and steaming coffee. Parked outside the garage, I dialed. "Harlan?" she answered, her voice even expectant. "Yeah, car's fixed. Pick it up tomorrow or I can drop it off." A brief pause. "If you're free, bring it now. I'm home and it'd ease my morning rush." The drive felt familiar now, the truck rumbling along Hawthorne Lane as stars began to prick the sky. She greeted me at the door in jeans and a soft sweater, hair cascading freely, her face lit by the warm interior glow. She looked more at ease, less the damsel from the roadside. "You really went above and beyond," she said, her eyes meeting mine with quiet gratitude. "It's nothing. Keys are inside." Our hands brushed again as I handed them over, the touch deliberate in its brevity, stirring that same unsettled feeling. "Join me for coffee? I owe you for the hassle." I knew better, but the invitation tugged. Just for a minute. Her home was inviting, bookshelves brimming with worn volumes, a fireplace flickering with low flames, large windows framing the river's dark flow. The kitchen adjoined, aromatic with fresh herbs. We sat at the island, mugs steaming, and talk unfolded. The town's quirks, her demanding job, my stalled college dreams. Laughter punctuated the conversation, but so did silences, heavy with unasked questions. When she refilled my cup, her arm grazed mine, and we both froze for a heartbeat. Time slipped away. It was nearly midnight when I rose. Early shift calls. She walked me out, the hallway softly lit. "Thanks again, Harlan." At the door she added, "Need anything? A chat, coffee, just call. Even at night." The words mirrored her earlier ones, but now they carried a deeper resonance, leaving me unsettled as I drove home, the river's whisper echoing in my thoughts. This was only the beginning. You can't even imagine what she'll decide to do in a few hours. The week that followed was a blur of routine, but it felt like I was moving through it with half my mind elsewhere. Ironclad garage kept me busy, changing spark plugs, patching tires, nodding through Theo's grumbling about late shipments, but every clank of metal, every hum of the air compressor seemed to carry an echo of Mirabelle Thorne's voice. Her business card sat on my nightstand, its edges curling slightly from the damp air of my apartment above the laundromat on Cedar Bluff Street. I'd pick it up at night, turning it over in my hands, the embossed letters of her name catching the dim light of my lamp. I told myself it was nothing, just a job, a polite exchange, but the memory of her gaze in that warm kitchen, the brush of her hand, kept pulling me back. I didn't call her. Not yet. Each time I thought about it, my chest tightened with a mix of want and doubt, like I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't quite see. It was Thursday when Theo sent me to Albany for a parts run, a routine trip up Route 42 that I'd done 100 times before. The road stretched through rolling hills, the trees now bare, their skeletal branches clawing at a slate-gray sky. I was halfway back, the tow truck rattling with a crate of filters in the bed, when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from an unknown number. "Harlan, it's Mirabelle. Car's running fine, but now the dashboard light's flickering. Could you take a look? I'm home tonight." My heart gave a sharp thud, like a wrench slipping and banging against an engine block. I pulled into Rusty's fuel stop, the neon sign buzzing faintly above the pumps, and stared at the screen. The smart thing would have been to tell her to bring it to the shop tomorrow, keep it professional. But the thought of seeing her again, of stepping back into that charged space, overrode sense. My thumbs moved before my brain caught up. "Just left Albany. Can stop by in an hour." Her reply came fast. "Perfect. I'll be waiting." The drive to River's Edge Estates felt shorter this time, the familiar curves of Hawthorne Lane unfolding under the truck's tires. It was just after 7 p.m., the sky a deep indigo, streetlights casting pools of light across the townhouses. Her place stood at the end, number 47, its porch light glowing like a beacon in the gathering dark. I parked her Honda in the driveway, grabbed my toolkit, and knocked, my pulse already quicker than it should have been. Mirabelle opened the door, and the sight of her hit me harder than I expected. She wore a navy sweater that hugged her frame, jeans that fit just right, her dark hair loose and curling slightly at the ends, catching the light from the hallway. She was beautiful, no question, but it was the way she carried herself, around 38, I guessed, from the quiet confidence in her movements, tempered by those faint lines around her eyes, that made it hard to look away. "Harlan, you're a lifesaver," she said, her smile warm, but edged with something softer, more personal. Sorry to drag you out here so late. No trouble at all, I said, setting my tools down in the entryway, trying to keep my voice steady. Dashboard light, right? Let's take a look. We walked to her car, the air cool and sharp with the scent of pine from the nearby woods. I slid into the driver's seat, flipped on the ignition, and watched the dashboard flicker, a faint pulse like a struggling heartbeat. Probably a loose wire, I said, popping the panel beneath the dash and shining my flashlight inside. She leaned against the open car door, close enough that I could feel her presence, her shadow falling across me as she watched. You're good at this, she said after a moment, her voice thoughtful. Not just the mechanics, you've got a calm about you, Harlan. Most guys your age are restless, all over the place. I glanced up, caught off guard, my hands pausing on the wires. Her eyes were on me, steady and searching, and for a second, I forgot what I was doing. Guess I had to grow up fast, I said, forcing my focus back to the task. No one else was going to figure it out for me. She nodded, her expression softening, like she understood more than I'd said. I was like that too back in my 20s, always trying to prove I could handle everything alone. Got me into trouble sometimes. There it was, a thread of connection, fragile but real, pulling us closer in the quiet of the driveway. I tightened a loose connection, tested the dashboard again. The light held steady. Should be good now, I said, climbing out and wiping my hands on my jeans. Start it a few times tomorrow. Let me know if it acts up. Thanks, she said, but she didn't step back. Instead, she stayed there, her gaze lingering, her body framed by the car door. You want to come in? I'm making dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta. You've been on the road all day. It's the least I can do. The smart move was to say no, to drive back to my apartment and keep the lines clear. But her voice, the way it softened on my name, the way her eyes held a question she wasn't asking, it rooted me to the spot. All right, I said, the word slipping out before I could second-guess it. Pasta sounds good. Inside, her kitchen was alive with the scent of garlic and olive oil, a pot simmering on the stove, steam curling up in the warm light. The living room opened to it, the fireplace casting a soft glow across bookshelves and a worn rug, the river glinting darkly beyond the windows. She handed me a glass of water, no wine, no pretense, and we sat at the island counter, the same one as before, the wood cool under my hands. Conversation came easy at first, the quirks of Eldridge Hollow, like the way the diner's coffee always tasted better after midnight, or how she swore by almond brew on Beckman Street for a decent latte. I told her about the time I tried fixing a neighbor's lawnmower and ended up with a yard full of shredded grass, and she laughed, a sound that was low and genuine, easing the tension in my shoulders. But then the talk turned inward, like a river finding its course. She spoke of her ex-husband, a lawyer who'd walked out 2 years ago for someone younger, someone who fit his new vision, she said, her voice steady but raw, like a wound that hadn't fully scabbed over. It's not just the leaving, she said, stirring the pasta with a wooden spoon, her eyes distant. It's the silence afterward. This house, it's too big for one person, you know? I nodded, my own apartment flashing in my mind, the way the quiet there could press against you like a physical thing. Yeah, my place is small, but it's the same. Some nights, it's like the walls are waiting for something to happen. Her eyes met mine, and the air shifted, heavy with the weight of what we weren't saying. She passed me a plate, her hand brushing mine as she did. And this time, the touch lingered, a second, maybe 2, but enough to make my breath catch. Neither of us pulled away, and the silence that followed was louder than any words. We ate, the clink of forks against ceramic filling the gaps. She asked about my plans, if I saw myself stuck at the garage forever. I admitted I'd thought about moving, maybe to Rochester, starting my own shop, but it felt like a dream from someone else's life, too far off to touch. She listened, her gaze steady, like she was seeing parts of me I hadn't shown anyone else. It was unnerving, how easy it was to talk to her, how her presence made the world feel both bigger and smaller at once. When we finished, she cleared the plates, her movements graceful but deliberate, like she was measuring every step. I offered to help, but she waved me off with a smile. "You've done enough tonight," she said, but as she turned from the sink, she paused, her hands resting on the counter, her eyes finding mine again. The room felt smaller, the air thick with something unspoken. "Harlan," she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "You don't have to keep coming out here. I'm sure you've got better things to do than fix my car or eat my half-decent pasta." "I don't mind," I said, my voice quieter than I meant, the words carrying more weight than I intended. "It's good, being here." Her smile faded, replaced by something deeper, more vulnerable. She took a half-step closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in her eyes, the faint tension in her jaw. "You're too young to be spending your evenings with me," she said, almost to herself, but her gaze didn't waver. "You should be out there, living your life." "I'm right where I want to be," I said, the words raw and honest, slipping out before I could stop them. My heart was pounding now, loud enough I was sure she could hear it. The gap between us, her age, her past, my uncertainty, loomed large, but so did the way she looked at me, like I was more than the kid with grease on his hands. She took a breath, like she was about to speak, then stopped. Her hand reached out, her fingers grazing my wrist, light as a feather but heavy with meaning. "You should go," she said, but her hand stayed there, warm and steady, and neither of us moved. The moment stretched, taut and fragile like a wire ready to snap. I wanted to say something to close the distance, but all I could do was hold her gaze, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears. Finally, she pulled her hand back, the spell breaking. "Call me if you want," she said, her voice barely a murmur. "You've got my number." I nodded, grabbing my jacket, the weight of her words settling into me as I stepped into the cold night. Driving back to Cedar Bluff Street, the road stretched dark and endless, but her touch lingered, a quiet fire under my skin. Something was shifting, and I wasn't sure I could stop it, or if I wanted to. What she says next will change everything, for her and for him. Those days after my last visit to Mirabelle's house felt like I was carrying an invisible weight, one that pressed down harder with every passing hour. I'd go through the motions at Ironclad Garage, tightening lug nuts, draining oil pans, listening to Theo bark orders about inventory shortages. But my focus was fractured, splintered by the memory of her fingers on my wrist, the way her voice had cracked just a little when she told me to go. At 23, I thought I knew what it meant to want something, but this was different. A quiet ache that settled in my chest, making even the simplest tasks feel distant. Her number glowed on my phone screen more than once, but I didn't dial. Each time I'd set it down, telling myself it was for the best. She was right, after all. She had a life shaped by years I hadn't lived, a divorce that left scars, and I was just starting out, grease under my nails and uncertainty in every step. What right did I have to complicate things for her? But the pull didn't fade. If anything, it grew, like a current beneath still water. It was Saturday when her call came, cutting through the garage's din like a clear note. I was under a pickup truck, wrestling with a rusted exhaust, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Wiping sweat from my forehead, I answered, her voice filling the line, steady but with that undercurrent of need I'd come to recognize. "Harlan, it's Mirabelle. I hate to ask again, but my porch light's flickering and dying out. It's not a car, I know, but... Are you handy with wiring?" I leaned against the workbench, tools forgotten, my heart kicking up a notch. "Yeah, I can handle that. Got the tools for it. When works for you?" "Tonight, if you're not tied up. I'm home after 6. "All right. I'll come by after I wrap up here." I hung up, ignoring the rational voice in my head that screamed this was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Theo shot me a curious look when I mentioned heading out late again, muttering something about young guys and their distractions, but he let it slide with a shrug. By 6:30, The sky had turned a deep, unforgiving blue, the first real chill of November biting through my jacket as I parked the tow truck in her driveway. River's Edge Estates felt quieter than usual, the townhouses huddled against the wind, her unit at the end glowing with that familiar porch light, though now it sputtered weakly, casting erratic shadows. I grabbed a smaller toolkit this time, the one with wire strippers and testers, and knocked, my breath visible in the cold air. Mirabelle answered quickly, as if she'd been waiting. She stood there in a cream sweater that looked soft to the touch, dark pants hugging her legs. Her hair pulled back loosely with a few strands framing her face like they couldn't be contained. She was striking, her beauty deepened by that quiet strength, the subtle grace of someone around 38, whose eyes held stories of loss and resilience. It made the air between us feel thicker, more charged every time. "You're a saint for this," she said, stepping aside to let me in, her voice warm but tinged with apology. "This house seems determined to fall apart on me one piece at a time." "Old places like this have a mind of their own," I said, managing a half smile as I set my tools down. "Let's get that light sorted." She led me back out to the porch, the fixture overhead, a simple glass dome, flickering like it was on its last breath when she flipped the switch. I pulled a stepladder from her garage, the metal cold under my hands, and climbed up, unscrewing the cover while she held a flashlight below, her beam steady even as the wind rustled the leaves in the nearby trees. The silence wrapped around us, not uncomfortable but loaded, like we both sensed the undercurrents pulling us along. "Do you ever think about getting out of Eldridge Hollow?" she asked, her voice casual, but I could hear the probe in it, like she was testing the waters. "You've got real talent with your hands. You could do more than patch up cars and lights in a small town." I twisted a wire, focusing on the exposed connections, but her words hit close. "Yeah, crosses my mind. Maybe head to Rochester, open my own shop someday. But leaving's harder than it sounds. Roots and all that. What about you? This place feel like home yet?" She paused, the flashlight dipping slightly as if her thoughts weighed it down. "It's become home, I suppose. After the divorce, I needed the quiet to rebuild. But sometimes quiet turns into isolation, like the walls are closing in." I looked down at her then, catching the way her lips tightened, the vulnerability she let slip. "I know that feeling," I said softly, my voice carrying more than I intended. The fix was simple, a frayed wire, nothing major, and I secured it, climbing down to test the switch. The light burned steady now, bathing us in a warm, unwavering glow. "Good as new," I said, wiping my hands, but she didn't move away, her eyes holding mine with that same intensity. She smiled, but it was laced with something deeper, hesitation, or perhaps invitation. "You're too good at this, Harlan. Come inside? I've got tea brewing, or coffee if you prefer. It's cold out here." I knew I should decline, head back to my apartment and let this fade into memory. But her voice, the way it wrapped around my name, made refusal feel impossible. "Tea sounds fine," I said, following her in, the warmth of her home enveloping me like a forgotten comfort. We settled in the living room this time, on the couch facing the fireplace, where flames danced low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The river outside was a dark mirror, reflecting the moon's pale light, and mugs of tea steamed on the coffee table between us. Talk started light, the way winter transformed the town, blanketing everything in silence. Her favorite book, a dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby on the shelf, its themes of longing hitting closer than I'd admit. But the conversation kept drifting back to us, to the unspoken gaps in our lives. At one point, she leaned back, her fingers idly tracing the mug's rim, her gaze distant, yet focused on me. "You're not like most guys your age, Harlan," she said, her voice low, thoughtful. "They're always rushing, chasing the next thing. You're steady, like you're waiting for life to unfold on its own terms." My throat tightened, her words stirring something deep. "Maybe I am," I said, the admission slipping out unfiltered. Her eyes locked onto mine, and the room seemed to contract, the air heavy with everything we hadn't named. She set her mug down slowly, deliberately, like she was buying time. "Harlan," she began, then faltered, her hand pressing against the couch cushion as if steadying herself. Whatever's happening here, it's not fair to you. I'm too old for this, for you. I've got a past that's messy, a life you shouldn't get tangled in." I leaned forward, my voice firmer than I felt, the storm inside me raging. "You don't get to decide what's fair for me, Mirabelle. I'm here because I choose to be." Her breath hitched, and she looked almost breakable in that moment, standing on the precipice of something irreversible. She rose, crossing to the window, her back to me as she stared out at the river. "You don't understand," she murmured, her voice laced with quiet pain. "You're young, full of possibilities. I won't drag you into my complications." I stood, closing the distance, stopping just behind her, close enough to feel the heat from her body but not touching. "I'm not asking for promises," I said, my words low and earnest. "But don't push me away because you think you know what's best. Tell me you don't feel this too." She turned, her eyes searching mine, filled with conflict, the fear of repeating past mistakes, the pull she couldn't deny. Her hand rose, hesitant, then rested lightly on my arm, the touch sending a jolt through me, anchoring us in the moment. "This can't work," she said, but her voice wavered, and she didn't pull away. "Then why does it feel like it already is?" I asked, my heart thundering, every beat echoing the truth I couldn't ignore. She didn't respond with words, but her fingers tightened on my arm, the fireplace's crackle the only sound piercing the silence. Then slowly she leaned in, her forehead pressing against mine, her breath warm and ragged against my skin. It wasn't a kiss, but it was intimate, a bridge across the chasm between us, one we both knew we shouldn't cross but couldn't resist. "Harlan," she whispered, my name a confession, heavy with unspoken longing. "If you stay now, I won't know how to say goodbye later." I held still, afraid to shatter the fragility, but the ache in her voice mirrored my own. Then she stepped back, her hand slipping away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, resolute yet broken.